days when there was no king. Every man did what was right in his own eyes, but God raised up deliverers.
Hello and welcome back to Teaching Through the Bible. You may wonder, what do the Transformers have to do with Israel, with the Bible? And we'll get to that in a moment. First, just want to go over again what's the big picture here before we get back into the book of Judges, the last narrative that we have in the book of Judges, before we move on to Samuel. Of course, we have the Old Testament, the New Testament, right? Very basic level. Old Testament points forward to Jesus, New Testament points back to him. But more specifically, each of them is broken up into three groups. Within the Old Testament, within the New Testament, you have the covenant. That's showing, here's what the covenant is. Old Testament is the law books, those first 5 books of the Bible. The New Testament is the Gospels. Then you have the covenant history section. You have how did God's people respond to the covenant? The prophets section. That's what we're in right now in the Old Testament in Judges. And then the book of Acts, the Acts of the Apostles in the New Testament. Finally, we have the covenant life section. Well, how should people, not how did they actually, how did Israel respond as we're seeing, but how should they? What are some examples of what that should look like, responding to the covenant? That's the writings in the Old Testament and the letters in the New. But now we're at the end of the book of Judges, looking again at unfaithful Israel. We're not looking primarily at the judges at this point. We've seen the judges and how God uses those judges. But now in this narrative and in the previous one, we don't see a judge intervene. We see what happens as God's people are being unfaithful and the reason why there needed to be judges in the first place. So this contextually, we're looking at a time earlier in the Judges period. So even though this is the last narrative, it is chronologically one of the first things that happens. We see that because Aaron's grandson is high priest. And when they entered the promised land with Joshua, that was at a time when Aaron's son was the high priest. So this is just one generation removed from the time when Joshua was the leader. So this is just that very next generation. Here's what's already happening. Now it starts out with a Levite is seeking his unfaithful wife. His unfaithful wife, she's run off, and he is going after her. And we may say, hey, that actually sounds like, that sounds kind of like Jesus, right? Jesus going after his unfaithful people. That's a great start, we think. Is this Levite going to be a Christ figure? Is he going to show us Jesus in this narrative? Well, it starts out, he's going after her. She has gone back to live with her father. He goes to bring her back home and bring her back, be husband and wife again. And the father, he keeps inviting the Levite to stay. Hey, stay another night. And culturally, this could just be genuine hospitality. The hospitality was a much bigger deal in that culture, and it's a much bigger deal in the Bible than at least for most people in the United States it is. Different cultures have a different emphasis on that. The Bible itself, it's not just a cultural thing. The Bible says this is a big deal. And so perhaps the father is being genuine, and perhaps the man eventually, he's just rejecting that hospitality. Maybe it's a negative comment on that man, but also perhaps the father is just kind of using that to keep his daughter with him and not let the husband have his wife back. And so it could kind of be, I think, interpreted either way. I'm not really sure where I land on it. Would be interested to hear your opinions and comments below. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think this is the man being hospitable and the Levite rejecting that, or is this the father is trying to use that to keep his daughter with him, and then this is kind of the husband saying, no, this is my wife, she's going with me, and that being part of him being the faithful husband with the unfaithful wife. But either way, you have hospitality kind of in the background throughout this story, and here it's kind of more at the front. But then we get to when they do actually leave, when the Levite and his wife do actually leave to go back home, they have to make a choice whether to stay in Jerusalem overnight or stay in Gibeah overnight. And here we see an interesting comparison. And this is a comparison that continues throughout the rest of the narrative, in a sense. Because basically, it's comparing Jerusalem being Canaanite, being the people that God has said they need to be destroyed, don't be like them, all this kind of stuff. And Gibeah being a city within Benjamin, being part of the tribe of Benjamin, Israelites. Right? So you have the Canaanites and you have God's people. Here's the comparison. And the Levite says, oh, no, we don't want to go spend the night at Jerusalem. We don't want to spend the night with essentially with the Canaanites. Maybe you think of Sodom and Gomorrah. We reject that, right? We don't want to be around those people. Well, then we're going to go to Gibeah. What happens at Gibeah? This is God's people, right? But when they go into Gibeah, where they go to the square, they wait there, which is part of the culture of this is what happens. You're traveling, you go there, you wait in the town square. We talked about this back with Samson, right? It's either that or go to where the prostitutes were, and that was kind of like the hotel thing. So they stay in the town square, waiting for someone to invite them to stay with them. That's just kind of what that culture did. And so they're left on the street. Nobody from Gibeah invites them, hey, come stay with us tonight. They're making it clear by being in the town square. They're like, hey, we're waiting for a place to stay. The only person who invites them in is this old man comes out from the fields, it says, comes in and says, oh, hey, don't stay here tonight. Don't want to do that. That's kind of weird. You don't want to be here. Come stay with me. Right? But this guy, he's not even from Gibeah. It says he's a sojourner from Ephraim. So he's not even really part of the town. Kind of has some resonance with Abraham's nephew Lot, right? How he invites he didn't know they were angels, but invites them in, and he's not even really part of the town. He's a sojourner, and they point that out. And then what happens? Well, again, sounds kind of similar. Sounds like we've seen this before, back in Genesis, where that night the people in the town, these guys, they all come and say they want to know the man, the Levite, right? And the old man says, whoa, hold on, please don't do that. Because knowing him, and this is where it gets, we're going back to Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So, be aware, that's what we're talking about today. Knowing him, that doesn't mean having a friendly chat. That they want to do some other stuff with him, right? Try not to get too detailed on that, but he says, don't do that to him. I've got a daughter. He's got his woman too. We'll offer those women up to you to do, essentially to abuse them in a sexual way. And so this is awful in a number of ways. I mean, the guys in the town, that they want to do that, the guys want to do it with a guy that then the old man and the Levite, they're offering up their their girls, the old man's daughter and the Levite's wife, as kind of replacements. Like they're just saying, here, take our women instead. This whole thing is just a mess, and it's just like Sodom and Gomorrah. We're having a repeat here. But here's the thing, is the repeat, it's not at Jerusalem. It's not the Canaanites that are doing this. This is at Gibeah. It's already been established. This is Benjamin. This is the tribe of Benjamin. This is a city that is part of God's people doing the Sodom and Gomorrah thing. And so what we see here, we've got this comparison. We've already had that made explicitly. Hey, I don't want to go to Jerusalem. I don't want to go with those people. Let's go to Gibeah. Let's go to a place where there's God's people. And that's where this is happening. And so we have this comparison between the two. And what are we finding? We kind of find that just like we have this, I guess you'd call it catchphrase from Transformers, right? Robots in disguise, more than meets the eye. Right? The Transformers, they look like cars until they transform and you realize, oh, that's not an 18-wheeler. That is Optimus Prime. Or maybe it would be more apt if instead of Optimus Prime mask, if I had Megatron mask, seeing as he's the leader of the Decepticons, because what we're really seeing here is a deception in that Benjamin is not any different than the Canaanites. It's the same thing. They have become the Canaanites. They have become what they were supposed to destroy. They have become the evil that the land had before they got there. And that's the point of what's going on here. And there needs to be justice for this. And we'll see that in the next video. The last video that we're going to have on the book of Judges, we're going to see how that response plays out. Now, the Levite, he ends up sending, it seems he's sending his wife out. And she gets assaulted, essentially, to death. That's basically what happens. And I could put it in much more awful language, but trying to keep it as unviolent in my words as possible. Read the passage. It's brutal. It is horrendous. What ends up happening with her, and he lets her go and take that abuse, protecting himself, right? And so that's where we see, if we think that we're seeing this Levite be the Christ figure, this is where it falls off. Because you have the Levite, you have this guy who he goes after his unfaithful wife. He goes to seek her out. And at the end of the day, when evil happens, he seeks out justice for the evil that has happened to his unfaithful wife. And so in that, we're seeing kind of, maybe you've got this guy, and then he seeks after her, and then something happens here, right? And then he wants justice for the evil that's happened to her. So at 3 out of 4 of these steps, you're like, oh yeah, this is basically kind of like, this is like Jesus. But you have the middle spot, right? You have, instead of what Jesus did, as he took that abuse, right? Even though we're unfaithful, he was the one to come in and take the abuse that, in our case, we deserved. For this woman, maybe this guy tried to reason, oh, well, we're only here because she was unfaithful in the first place, so it's kind of her fault in the first. Maybe he tried to reason that out that way or something, I don't know. But certainly, this specific situation, it's not like she deserved what was going on. This was evil people in Gibeah making evil choices. And instead of being the one to protect her and defend her, he is having her be a shield. The Levite is having her be a shield for him. So he's falling well short of what we need if we're going to compare this with Jesus. Because Jesus is the one that said, I will take on all of that evil, take on the abuse myself to protect and to cause us to be able to be with him in eternity forever. So this Levite really misses the bar, really shows us the gap there that needs to be filled with Jesus. So in a way, maybe you could say that we do see, we don't get to see Jesus here, but we do get to see our need for Jesus here. And that's where that is. But as I said, he does call for justice. He does call for the rest of Israel to respond to the evil, to the Sodom and Gomorrah type incident that has just happened. And we'll find out how they respond, what they do in the next video. Thank you for watching that video. I hope that it helped you learn a little bit more about the Bible today. And if you'd like to continue to learn more about the Bible, then we have plenty of other videos on the channel. And if this has been helpful for you, then you can always let me know by subscribing to the channel. And hopefully I'll be able to continue to help you learn even more about God's Word. Thanks.